Citizens of the internet, hope you are doing well on this beautiful Monday morning. I wanted to start today by talking about political parties in America because things are, well, to lead with the thesis, I don't believe that political parties are relevant anymore. I don't believe that left and right, even in American politics, is a real thing, and I'm about to show you why. So let us start here with some footage from good old CNN. Let me make sure that I got on this little I kind of went down this wormhole because I happened to see friend of the show, Marjorie Taylor Greene, the other night. And all these new conservative people, all the Freedom Caucus people are being called racists and white supremacists and all that. So let's listen to, well, first of all, let's get this rocking, right? You got to see what I see. Do you see what I see? Yes, I know I have a lovely singing voice. All right. So let's get this cracking here.
Into this anti-Ukraine sentiment in American politics. Listen to Tucker Carlson on Fox, basically defending this leaker accused of leaking national security secrets.
The only man who has been taken into custody, or likely ever will be, is a 21-year-old Massachusetts Air National Guardsman who leaked the slides that showed that Lloyd Austin was lying. He revealed the crimes, therefore he's the criminal. That's how Washington works. Telling the truth is the only real sin.
No lies told, by the way. This is so interesting. It's very interesting to me. And again, I'm doing this whole piece about the parties switching sides and about there really not being any difference between right and left anymore. There is there's no real left in America. Look, CNN is here defending the security state against a potentially damaging leak, and I don't even know how much I believe the narrative around this, because first of all, I have a lot of questions. How did that kid get access to such high level security, confidential information? He's like a ground level airman. He should not have access to that information. So that immediately set off alarm bells for me, because now the follow-up to this is they're trying to censor the internet more as a result of what this kid did. But let's keep watching for a minute.
I think a lot of Republicans would like that to be a fringe view, but it is speaking to a part of the Republican Party right now that's
established power would like that to be a fringe view. That's the problem. And I just did this piece about propaganda in America, and it's so obvious when you watch these talking heads. Yeah, it's great that it's multicultural now. It's not just old white guys standing for war and like cheerleading war on mainstream TV. Now it's like, black women and women of color and Hispanic women and, trans women, whatever, you name it. As long as they're pushing for endless war, they're good, and the point that Tucker Carlson brought up is a good one. These are public servants. Lloyd Austin came from Raytheon. These wars are literally giant cash dumps to the weapons industry, which Raytheon is a part of. And, I'm not impugning Raytheon or anything, because I haven't seen, any data that specifically makes them any worse than any of the others. But at the same time, it's such an obvious conflict of interest. And then you have the reality that I guarantee you that these defense contractors spend a ton of advertising money on a station like CNN. So it's this whole system is kind of built to it's a self-licking ice cream cone, as the Afghanistan general said.
Sees these leaks as a public service in some way?
Well, it's playing into the grievance politics that we've seen for.
Oh my God! Transparency. It is a public service. Of course, it's a public service. To news is something someone doesn't want printed. Everything else is advertising.
The past 6 years in this country. And I think this is the other subplot here, because this allowed us a window into some of the spaces that particularly young white men in this country are inhabiting. And it wasn't just anti-Ukraine, it was anti-Black, anti-trans, anti-gay, very pro-gun, if you look at a lot of the paraphernalia that this young man was collecting.
Okay, and again, at no point do these people discuss the content of the information. It's all about the personality of the leaker. And we need to look at this. It's such an obvious propaganda campaign to push for more censorship. She's like, oh, this isn't because Lloyd Austin is a black man. So it's racism to criticize him. He's the position of power. And now you see how this, people call it woke. I call it, fucking ridiculous. But they're weaponizing HR policies, basically. So if you criticize the powerful, they can fire you for microaggressions. Like, hey, President so-and-so, why'd you start that illegal war? Well, since I'm a man of Hispanic descent, you're a racist. Put him in jail for hate speech. That's not that we have a president of Hispanic descent. I was using that as an example. But, people who criticized Obama. And listen, let's be honest. There was a lot of unwarranted criticism of Obama when he was president that was racist. And it was just, the same people that criticized Obama so hardcore didn't have the same criticisms for George W. Bush, who did a lot of the same things. So it's hard to not call a spade in some of those situations. And that should be dealt with on a case-by-case basis. But that doesn't mean that we just get to shut everyone up, call anyone we want a racist and turn them off or censor them. If people are going to be racist, let them speak, let them expose themselves,
This is just another exclamation point on the point that a lot of the politics right now in Congress, for instance, is basically people who are very bombastic, who are about us versus them and grievance politics, and that this is actually having a real impact on our culture and on young people.
Okay, grievance politics. That's what she's pushing. Instead of holding powerful people to account and looking at the content of what these leaks show, and I don't even know what a lot of the content is. What I do know is it says that the war is supposed to go on. They have a schedule for it. It's definitely not going to end this year. It was one of the takeaways, which is really odd. But there's no talks of peace talks. Like, what are we doing to de-escalate here in the US? It's very obvious that it's a defense-funded thing because they want to keep sending weapons because they get paid if we keep sending weapons to Ukraine. And they don't have relatives in Ukraine that are being murdered or have to fight in war. And, it's just wild that how everything has been flipped around. I say that a lot lately. I say wild a lot. I need to calm the fuck down. So I wanted to start with this little bit because it's absolutely ridiculous that they're using racism to push censorship. If you know anything about the ACLU, there was a documentary with Ira Glasser from NPR back in the day about Skokie, about how the ACLU defended Nazis in Skokie, because if you don't support freedom of speech for views you despise, you don't support it at all. And I know I've said this 1,000 times, but the reality is, let racists expose themselves. And bad speech is only bested by better speech. You know, if people are going to say, people that are spouting racist views, it's very easy to dismantle them because there's no value to it whatsoever. And the people that are pushing those views are not smart. So it's very easy to, engage them intellectually and defeat them. But let them show people who they are. Instead, what we have is the public allowing this, desire to be never see a thing you don't like, or and even then it's you can block people on Twitter or Facebook or even on your phone that you don't want to talk to or that you don't like. You can pick and choose and curate your own media environment. None of this needs to be shut down, and the fact that these assholes are pushing for that is just disgusting, frankly. These people are gross. We need to censor the internet because it hurts my feelings. So, I wanted to talk about party switching, okay? Because I helped a blogger friend of mine write a piece a while back about how Democrats became Republicans. And the reason that we did this piece is because people kept telling me, well, Democrats are the party of the KKK. And I'm like, yeah, that's true. But there's a whole couple decades of history in between now and then that you're missing, like it's actually 100 years or so. So I read or listened to P.T. Barnum's biography a few weeks ago, and in that he talks about it took place in the 1800 1850 1860, from I don't know how old he was probably it started, I think it starts in 1830 or something, runs from early 1800s to to early 1900s basically. So it occurs during the Civil War, and during the course of that he talks about the Democrats being secessionists. So anyway, obviously the parties changed, and this is kind of this piece that I helped this friend of mine put together, and it starts with this Dixiecrats after the passage of the Civil Rights Act meme, because this is exactly what happened. They called these citizens councils. George, I support Wallace. And he has a Democrat, then he goes in the bushes and comes back out with a silent majority Nixon Agnew sticker. So this guy's like, whenever someone hits me with the Democrats or the party, I bust out this meme. So anyway, this has a whole thing about, it starts out with a bit about arguing with your uncle at Thanksgiving. But then it kind of talks about this PragerU video where they talk about it. So let's watch this real quick. PragerU, obviously not my cup of tea.
When you think about racial equality and civil rights, which political party comes to mind? The Republicans or the Democrats? Most people would probably say the Democrats.
That's because they passed the Civil Rights Act.
But this answer,
but the Republicans freed the slaves,
is incorrect. Since its founding in 1829, the Democratic Party has fought against every major civil rights initiative and has a long...
Wrong. See, and these people are just flat out lying about this. That's not true. That's not true. And if you want to have a valid argument, you need to not lie. And they put up a black lady, to make their racist argument. Let's watch a little more. I'm not going to watch all of
discrimination. The Democratic Party defended slavery, started the Civil War, opposed Reconstruction,
founded the Ku Klux Klan, imposed segregation.
The first part is true. The Democratic Party did not found the Ku Klux Klan. Sorry, that's not true.
Perpetrated lynchings, and fought against the Civil Rights Acts of the 1950s and 1960s.
That is not true. So let's get back into this. PragerU is a stock of liars. We know that now. They just make shit up. So I'm just gonna there's a couple parts here where it breaks into a bunch of this different stuff, but this is the kind of high level bullet points, right? So in 1865, Abe Lincoln, a Republican, leads the Union during the Civil War. The people who support equal rights, freeing the slaves, are largely Republicans, while slave-owning Confederacy is made up of Democrats. Yes, this is true. The Democrats were the Confederates. So the U.S. government under the Republican Party defeats the Confederacy. Democratic Party then becomes the vehicle for white supremacist redeemers, from which the Ku Klux Klan emerges. So the Democratic Party is the vehicle for redeemers at that time, but the Ku Klux Klan emerges from that. So again, by 1876, Redeemer Democrats have taken control of all the state governments in the South. From this point and until the 1960s, state and local governments in the South are almost entirely monopolized by Confederate Democrats. From 1880 to 1944, the Democrats reinforced loyalty to white voters, emphasizing the suffering of the South during the war at the hands of Yankee invaders, the War of Northern Aggression. And from 1890 to 1910, also act to disenfranchise blacks, beginning with Mississippi. Southern states adopted new constitutions and other laws. This is the Jim Crow era, disenfranchising virtually all black and many poor white residents. From 1876 to 1944, the National Democratic Party approves any calls for civil rights for black folks in Congress. By the 1920s, as the memories of the Civil War, the solid South cracks slightly. A Republican is elected representative from Texas in 1920, serving until 1912. However, with the Democrats' national landslide of 1932, the South again becomes solidly Democrat. Here's where the switch begins. In 1948, the National Democratic Party adopts a civil rights plank. And this starts, I believe, with Truman. This is strongly opposed by conservatives within the party who are against racial integration, and by moderates who are feared alienating Southern voters. So this is the same thing that's been going on in the Democratic Party for years, since I've been a voter there, where the moderates, the right-wingers, frankly, will not let the left have anything, and the left takes their lumps and continues to vote for them anyway. I'm unfortunately not one of those people. But there are still a lot of them. In response to the Democratic Party adopting civil rights and supporting integration of blacks and whites, Southern Democrats formed the States' Rights Democratic Party, or the Dixiecrats, which nominated Strom Thurmond for president. From 1910 to 1970, the Great Migration occurs, and a lot of blacks leave the South for urban areas, and a lot of new people migrate to the South, softening the hatred of Republicans. As a result, Republicans begin to win elections in states like Texas and Florida. Despite blacks being freed almost a century earlier, the South is still largely segregated. In 1963, President John F. Kennedy pushes for a Civil Rights Act that will completely end segregation in the US, he is assassinated. Of course he is, because we can't have changes like that happening. John Kennedy was, of course, a Democrat. Seeing the Democratic Party beginning to support civil rights, former Dixiecrat Senator Strom Thurmond in South Carolina agrees to change parties in 1964, becoming a Republican. The 1964 Republican primary had Barry Goldwater, a staunch right-wing conservative who was against the Civil Rights Act, facing several moderate Rockefeller Republicans. Goldwater went on to win the primary, pushing more Republicans to the Democratic Party. He also lost the general election by a landslide to Lyndon B. Johnson, who passed the Civil Rights Act, originally proposed by Kennedy. The Democrats had officially become the party that ended segregation. In 1972, Richard Nixon, a Republican, adopts the Southern strategy, targeting racist white voters in the South. Lee Atwater is quoted describing this strategy. Okay, let's watch this real quick. Well, that's the Wikipedia. There is footage of Lee Atwater basically saying out loud what the Southern strategy is, and he uses very, very racist language. He uses the N-word with a hard R. And this is on tape, so it's undeniable. This is the point in the 80s, the Reagan era, the Goldwater era, whatever you want to call it, when the Republicans literally became the Democratic Party and they switched sides completely. And why am I going through this history? Why am I going through all this stuff? Because it's happening again. It's happening again. But let's so this is this meme. Dixiecrats after the passage of the Civil Rights Act. Whites only, Wallace, they go in the bushes, they come out, and they're Nixon, Agnew. And so that's kind of the basic transition of it. And to argue now that the Democrats are the party of the KKK is a joke, because the Republican Party is the one that's waving the Confederate flag and, you know, all this Confederate lore and trying to keep statues of Confederate, you know, leaders and all that kind of stuff. I mean, that is, you know, it's cool. Like no one's going to forget history, but you don't honor the people who lost. Like those people took up arms against the Union, against the government of the United States, and tried to leave the country, like tried to tear the country apart, and they lost. Like they don't get to be honored with statues and like, you know, so they can maybe in museums, like put the statues in museums. Hey, remember when we used to be dumb enough to honor people who like started a war against our own country? And this is all, you know, very well documented in the Civil War and everything. Unlike what's happening now with January 6th, where it's completely fake, and they're using this kind of sentiment to gin up favorship of censorship and, you know, giving more money to the Capitol Police and all that kind of stuff. And really to insulate themselves as they begin to pass more and more laws that people don't like and people want to protest. You know, and I'm not saying that anyone should do anything violent. It's obviously you should never do anything illegal, but protest and rebellion and, you know, revolution is the nature of America. That's, you know, where we came from. So the next thing I wanted to kind of touch on here, since we're moving along down this path of the parties shifting back and forth. So all this stuff happens, right? And I noticed this during the Obama years, because I was obviously, you know, an Obama guy, but it somehow became cool for Democrats to be pro-war with Obama, you know. And I don't know if you remember this or not. even though Obama largely won the Democratic primary because he voted against the Iraq War. People who were alive during that era or who voted during that era should remember that, because that's why he beat Hillary Clinton. And I think Biden was running then as well. There's a lot of people running post George Bush and Obama, John Edwards, Clinton, and Obama was able to push through. But during that era, during Obama's presidency, honestly, what happened is the Democrats, or the Uniparty, as I like to call them, got really good at propaganda. And I've talked about this a lot, because Obama and Democratic presidents are able to do the terrible shit that Republicans aren't able to get away with. Clinton was able to pass NAFTA. Clinton was able to deregulate the finance industry. Obama was able to continue Bush and Cheney's expansion of wars with drone wars, and while liberals cheered it. And so in 2016, when the next election cycle started, something interesting happened. And we're going to talk about that right now. What happened is the neoconservatives started to move into the Democratic Party. Because Trump, when it became real obvious that Trump was going to be the Republican nominee, the people who run wars weren't going to have that, because Trump had anti-NATO retairic. I don't know if you remember this or not, but he talked to Alex Jones and stuff like that. He was a real outside the mainstream candidate. And so in 2016, I remember when Trump won, talking to my cousin's husband, who works he's very blue collar. And I said, hey, Trump doesn't care about you. He shits on a golden toilet in a multi-million-dollar penthouse in Manhattan. And you know what he said to me? This blue collar guy said to me, he said, yeah, but he's not a Clinton or a Bush. And I went, wow, now I get it. Because I live in Los Angeles. I know plenty of people who are not white that voted for Trump. And the idea that he was elected by racists and, Russians, it's all propaganda. It's all stuff that was blared out through the propaganda arm that was built during the Obama years. So what I'm going to show you next is real interesting stuff, and I think you're going to appreciate it. So this article details the neoconservative elements in the Biden administration, and there are a lot of them. One of the things I learned from this that I did not know is Victoria Nuland is Robert Kagan's wife. I had no idea about this. And Kagan and Blinken wrote an op-ed together, right before Biden got elected. So Biden's entire, State Department is neocon hawks. Some of them are liberal hawks, like Samantha Power, but a lot of them are these neocons. So on January 20th, Biden began serving as president, and his foreign policy team is virtually complete, mostly made up of former officials from Barack Obama's administration with whom Biden has worked in the past. However, Biden's foreign policy will not be a simple continuation of Obama's. The international and domestic political situation has changed. And this site's called United World International, good site. So neocons are on board. Moreover, the Democratic Party is not what it used to be. Donald Trump's rise to power in the U.S. in 2016 was accompanied by a mass exodus of neoconservatives from the Republican Party. William Kristol, Max Boot, David Frum, Rick Wilson, Jennifer Rubin suddenly became Democrats, accusing Trump of betraying the ideals of democracy. No, here's what happened. When Trump became the nominee of the Republican Party, they went, oh shit, our grift is not going to work with this guy because so they comfortably moved over to the other side because in DC, I like, some people call it the deep state, but I like what Max Blumenthal and Aaron Mate use, permanent Washington, because it sounds less conspiratorial and is a more accurate description of who these people are. They're people who just have jobs in DC as like consultants or campaign advisors or whatever, who they don't give a shit about ideology. They don't have any political values other than the attaining power. And with these neocons too, a lot of it is like world domination for the US, which I mean is already kind of happened. But also so this is one of those areas where I get a little philosophically tied up because obviously I love my country and my way of life, and I'm not some kind of traitor or anything, but you also have to look at the world through clear eyes and know that there are other cultures and other countries out there, and even though I think the U.S. has been the dominant force for years, maybe we won't be forever, and there's nothing wrong with that. And to just kind of belligerently try to cling to that makes us look bad. And I think what's really sad is we used to be able to lead by example. We used to have moral high ground. We used to be the good guys, but not anymore. Now our imperialism has gotten so bad. We have military bases everywhere. We're meddling in everyone's business and throwing weapons. I mean, it just came out in the conflict that we're involved in Ukraine that we're funding both sides of it again, which is what we did through the entire terror. We're funding both sides of a war. Zelensky is buying gas from Russia, buying fuel from Russia as he's fighting that. He's literally buying fuel, making them rich while he buys fuel to send his own guys into a meat grinder. Like what the hell is going on with that? And these are reports. I don't know how verified they are, but they come from Seymour Hersh, who has a pretty good track record. And so anyway, back to this. These people are not good people. They're permanent Washington. The convergence started during the Obama years when Max Boot wrote that Hillary Clinton was a powerful vote for neoliberalism, which was not so different in many respects from neoconservatism. Figures on Biden's foreign policy team, like future Secretary of State Antony Blinken, the National Security Advisor to Jake Sullivan, or Director of National Intelligence Avril Haines, were notorious interventionists. However, Trump's rise to power was a turning point when the neocons began to declare that their disillusionment with Republicans en masse. Consequently, their influence in the Democratic Party and its affiliated media increased, where neocons like Max Boot became the leading experts on foreign affairs. Nearly 300 Bush officials endorsed Joe Biden in 2020. Briefly, the doctrine of these people can be formulated as follows. The U.S. should actively interfere in the politics of other countries, remove unwanted regimes, promote liberal democracy with all its might, ensure planetary hegemony by all possible means, fight against countries that challenge the value and military hegemony of the West, China, Russia, and smaller countries like Turkey or even Hungary, where the sovereign and authoritarian tendencies are too strong. And of course, Israel must be guarded at all costs. In 2019, Robert Kagan, a prominent neoconservative, along with Antony Blinken, wrote an article urging the U.S. to abandon Trump's America First policies and continue the policies of George W. Bush and Barack Obama. Specifically, they call for a policy of preventive diplomacy and deterrence against U.S. adversaries, calling for containment of Russia and China. According to the Daily Sabin columnist Heike Okal, preventative diplomacy and deterrence is shorthand for sending boys in tanks wherever they can. So that nails it. You know, the difference between Trump and the neocons is Trump wants puts America first. He wants to spend that money that they're dumping into Ukraine here in the United States. And this dynamic played out when he was president. They impeached him for not sending like as much money as they wanted to Ukraine or something like that. I don't know the details of it, but the first impeachment thing they did on him involved Ukraine and him like not being sufficiently hawkish enough. And I don't know if you remember the story about Russian bounties that came out, which was a VOA propaganda story about how Russians were paying bounties in Afghanistan for American troops, and the Democrats and Liz Cheney used that to fight Trump's troop withdrawal from Afghanistan. So anyway, now Trump's on TV saying that the Biden administration botched the troop withdrawal and it was a surrender, and it's like it's ridiculous. That's when he loses me, you know, because I don't completely dislike him. I like this America First idea. I think that the idea that we should keep dumping billions and billions of dollars into other countries because these assholes want us to is ridiculous. You know, we have plenty of problems here that money would be very well spent on. Like every bridge in the country is crumbling. There are homeless people in tents everywhere. But no, we have to keep dumping money into Ukraine and whatever else. Robert Kagan's wife is Victoria Nuland, former Assistant Secretary of State for European and Eurasian Affairs in the Obama administration. She played an active role in organizing and supporting the color revolution in Ukraine in 2014, infamously advising to the U.S. Ambassador Jeffrey Payet, "Fuck the EU." The failed coup in Turkey in 2016 occurred during her stay in office. From 2003 to 2005, Victoria Nuland was a foreign policy advisor to Dick Cheney, the U.S. vice president that filled the U.S. administration with neocons. So you see what I'm getting at here? You know, and now, just to circle all the way back, Marjorie Taylor Greene is a Republican who is on the side of the person. And I had this argument with a family member of mine about this kid who leaked these documents. He's like, oh, it's probably just some punk kid. And I mean, you know, first of all, we don't know the kid's motivation. But second of all, why is everyone piling on the kid? He's a individual and supporting state power. My default position when this kind of stuff happens is to support the individual over state power. It's literally like this one kid who leaked some embarrassing documents against the entire security state, the FBI, the NSA, why did he do this? And what is the information relevant? Does it tell us things? And you watch the press, like this lady on CNN just did, talk about the leaker and the kid and how we need to tamp down harder on censorship. We need to monitor these groups more closely. I mean, you knew this was coming, but the way that people just kind of jump on board, the people have been so tricked by media and the whole, everything's been spun into a circle where now the Democrats are neocons, authoritarians, pushing for war and censorship. And it blows me away because when I got into politics, that's everything they were against. When I was a kid, it was the Republicans who were the pious, religious, that rapper is saying bad words. We need to stop him. He's destroying the morals of America. Now it's the Democrats doing that. When I was a kid, it was the Republicans that were ramping up the war machine, and it was usually, not Democrats like Biden or Hillary Clinton, not the uniparty Democrats, but Democrats like Dennis Kucinich and Obama, who voted against the Iraq war. And then Obama, of course, completely face planted and sold out. As soon as he got the nomination, he dropped his ban on corporate money and became And that is how this always plays out. It's so frustrating. And it happened with Bernie Sanders. As soon as Bernie Sanders got close to power, the Democratic Party shut him down. And the reason that Trump is so beloved is because he got through. And I say this time and time again, but the reason he's so hated by the establishment is because he beat their system. They have this media system in place, these talking heads like the ones on CNN here blabbing about how white supremacy and racism instead of the actual content of what this kid displayed to us, that the government's lying to us and they're siding with censorship and because in calling it, using racism to justify trying to like root out people who might do this again, or it's just mind-blowing that people buy this stuff too. People are so asleep. They're just like, yes, I support the leaker is anti-American. Not having access to knowing what our government is doing is American. We should never know the secrets of our government. We are too peon. We are too small to know what our government's doing. That's America right now. What's going on? Why are people so stupid? What? And for me, I come from a position, I'm a skeptic. So whenever I see anything or I see a group of people starting to go, hey, did you hear about... I'm like, oh, okay, what's this? What kind of narrative is being pushed here? My default reaction to mass media and shit like this is what's being pushed here? Skepticism. You should always be skeptical of everything and look at and wonder what the agenda is. And unfortunately, no one does that anymore. No one questions themselves, especially, and no one challenges themselves. But yeah, the parties have switched again, as you can see. And I just wanted to detail that because there's a lot of idiocy on both sides. There's a lot of, Republicans and right-wingers that will say, oh, the Democrats are the party of the key. No, they're not. But now they're the party of the neocons, for sure. And that's well documented. And I mean, look at what they're doing. So to close everything out, let's watch the rest of this clip with Marjorie Taylor Greene.
And she tweeted this week, Jack Teixeira is white, male Christian, and anti-war, and that makes him an enemy to the Biden administration. She goes on and on, criticizing the war in Ukraine, criticizing basically.
By the way, I love the idea that the Biden administration is anti-Christian. Are you kidding me? He's a Catholic. They let he could have codified Roe v. Wade and they let the Supreme Court shoot it down. I mean, I love that there's this fake left versus right debate as if Biden doesn't have 50 years worth of pushing right-wing policy that you can just look back at and go, oh yeah, this guy's somehow the leader of the left. How ridiculous do you have to be to believe that? But a lot of otherwise intelligent people believe it. It's saddening. It's not really saddening, it's angering.
Basically criticizing NATO and getting...
How dare you criticize NATO? Oh my God! Name a war that NATO that NATO pushed that resulted in something good. Name one. I'd love to see it. Do it in the comments here. What's a NATO excursion that's done any... NATO is a fucking arms reseller program for the defense industry so they can sell our outdated shit to countries and make cash off of it. It's ridiculous.
On this week.
What they're suggesting will destroy America's ability to defend itself. There is no justification for this, and for any member of Congress to suggest it's okay to leak classified information because you agree with the cause is terribly irresponsible and puts America in serious danger.
Says the guy who has 8 defense contractor hands up his ass puppeting him, who's been in Congress for God knows how many years. Let's look that up. How long has Lindsey Graham been in Congress? 1992. He got into Congress in 1992. So this guy has been in Congress for 30 plus years. This is his 31st year in Congress. This is what we need is term limits. Because going back to the idea that everything, there's more classified information. All classified information means is that someone in the government doesn't want you to see it. And again, what is news? News is something someone doesn't want published. So, you say what you want about security, prove that this stuff harmed people. If you can make an honest argument that leaking classified military documents puts people in harm's way, yeah, you might have an argument, but this doesn't at all. I mean, it actually makes a case to remove people from harm's way and sit down to a negotiating table when you really look at the details. But anyway, let's listen to this idiot a little bit more.
Yeah, so what Marjorie Taylor Greene said, I agree with what Heidi.
Actually, let's listen to the Real Housewives of CNN.
I mean, she invoked in her tweet, he was white, he was young, he was male. Same things that Tucker Carlson said. And I do think that some Republicans, like you mentioned, are trying to take that as a fringe view, as one way to criticize the Biden administration over this massive leak. They want to put the onus of what happened on the Biden administration and to criticize them over this. But I do think that the majority of members that I've spoken with, Republicans on Capitol Hill, take Lindsey Graham's view, which is that this is a very dangerous thing.
Which is that we belong to a single party that pushes for war at all costs. And anyone who opposes that is a secret Russian and a traitor to America. Give me my money. Lindsey Graham. Oh, I do declare I'm Lindsey Graham. Please give me my money, defense contractors. Lindsey Graham. How much money does he take from the defense industry? Defense donors. Senator Lindsey Graham. Lindsey Graham campaign finance summary. U.S. Immigration Fund, St. Francis Healthcare, Venture Employee Services. See, the thing that's crazy too about politics now is that you can't see who a lot of people get their money from because of the PAC system. Because of the PAC system is dark. The dark money thing with Citizens United, people can get all kinds of shady money through PACs. Stephen Colbert did such a great job with that. He had his Colbert PAC, and he kind of he did such a fantastic job showing how terribly corrupt and easy it is for people in permanent Washington to keep this grift going. And this is why we can't get anything we want. This is why Congress will send $113 billion to a money laundering scheme in a country on the other side of the planet, while East Palestine, Ohio is covered in chemicals. I'm sure $100 billion could do a lot to clean up that town. Maybe even just, move the residents or put them in hotels while the government completely, refurbishes their neighborhoods, or just relocate them altogether permanently and declare it a disaster like Chernobyl, Anyway, every time I turn on CNN or MSNBC or Fox or any of these major networks, it makes me so angry that people are this dumb. And they're not, these women aren't dumb. They're just being paid to push this stupid narrative that what's important here is white supremacy and racism, and not our government being held to account for spending a bunch of money on a wasteful war while, you know, there are, I mean, this is our country. What, you know, it's just, it makes it so patently obvious that who runs the country, because it's not the people. You know, people didn't vote, we didn't vote for the Ukraine war. No one ran on the Ukraine war. And people say, "Oh yeah, Putin invaded." Yeah, why did Putin invade? Do you know? You know, he didn't just wake up one day and invade Ukraine. That's not how it happened. There was a civil war going there. The U.S. exacerbated it. Neocons like Victoria Nuland fomented a coup, and we were arming Nazis. People like Ro Khanna came out and said this back in, you know, before there was a lockdown on the media by the neocons, but they came out and said straight out, "Hey, we're funding neo-Nazis in Ukraine, and we did this. The United States made this happen." And so we were giving these people weapons, and they were blowing the shit out of these bordering territories that border Russia and Russian-speaking people, literally committing genocide, killing Russian-speaking people. So there was a civil war. So Putin invaded to defend his people, frankly, who were being murdered. And that's the reality of the situation. He had no intention of taking over Ukraine. He wasn't trying to take all of Ukraine back. Even the Crimea thing that happened under Obama was a little suspect, and I didn't know about the nuance of that. But also, Ukraine used to belong to Russia, and that doesn't make it okay. I'm not saying what Putin did was okay or right at all. But I'm also saying look around and look at the last 50 years of U.S. foreign policy, and it's not like we can really wag a finger and be taken seriously, you know? So the best thing to do would be to sit down at the table and say, okay, look, here's what we're going to do. You know, we're going to divide up these, we're going to let these border territories be autonomous. So there's no fighting over them. Putin has actually agreed to that. They could, those border territories, I think it's the Donetsk, they could make those territories autonomous. Zelensky doesn't control them. Putin doesn't control them. They're autonomous states. But, you know, whatever the case, something eventually is going to have to be done because they're going to run out of Ukrainians. Everyone's going to be refugee. Everyone's going to evacuate the country or be killed. So it can't last forever. It's not the size of an Afghanistan. And these people on CNN are just like, how dare anyone show us something that might inhibit this war's continuance? I'm sorry. Hope you all taking good care of yourselves out there.